Thank you. And it's such a pleasure to be here today. I really appreciate you inviting me. Truly an honor. So before we get started today, I'd like to ask you all to do me a favor, and that is to take your preconceived notions of aging and longevity and retirement and just park them to the side for the next 35, 40 minutes so that we can focus on a new kind of aging, a more ageless aging. So what does this look like? Well, we're going to explore that here today. Each and every one of you, whether you working in the field of aging or aging yourself or both, I'm hoping that we all walk away today feeling a little bit different about aging and the opportunities that it provides to each and every one of us. So the way we're going to do this today is that we're going to take a look at these four powerful and converging trends that are changing each and every one of us individually and the world at large. So let's begin by taking a look at this whole idea of longevity. Now, most of us know that people are living longer and better than ever before. And we also know that COVID had an impact on this. It took more than a year off of average life expectancy. However, longevity experts do tell us that they believe that that's just like a blip, that longevity will continue to rise. But let's take a look at it throughout most of history. What you can see by looking at this chart is that in the past, most people didn't age. In fact, average life expectancy was under the age of 18. And 2/3 of all people who have ever turned 65 are alive right here and now. So let's fast forward to the last 1,000 years and let's look at that trends line. And you can see again that in the past, people did not age, they died. And the fear was dying young. And that's the way life was through most of history. But then something happened. The 20th century was a huge transformation. We saw a huge transformation take place. What we saw happening was life expectancy skyrocketed. So that on the first day of the 20th century, average life expectancy was only 47. On the last day, it had skyrocketed all the way up to on average 78. So what caused this? Well, lots of things. For one, we recognize that sanitation had a lot to do with staying healthy longer. We learned about antibiotics and penicillin and other kinds of medical breakthroughs helped us to make this happen. So that today, this is a new world, a world of longevity. And as you can see by looking at this chart, women are doing better in the longevity game than men. They generally outlive men by about 5 years. I was in Alaska a bunch of years ago, speaking at the governor's conference on aging, and the audience was filled with feisty, older Americans. And I made the statement that women outlive men by about 5 years. And I added to it, I said, in that 80+ age category, for every 100 women, there's only about 38 men alive. And there was a woman in the audience sitting right up front. She's probably in her 70s, very attractive. She stood up, she pounded her hand on the table in front of her, and she said, yeah, and I've met a lot of those men. They're not very alive at all. So yeah, I am poking a little fun at men, so sorry guys, but I say it in good humor, really. And what does it really mean? What it means for one thing is, what can we do to help men live longer, better? And second, it means that women, many women, are left alone at the end, the last years of their lives. They become what we call solo agers, and there's risks in aging alone. It means you potentially, not necessarily, but potentially have more social isolation and loneliness. And these are proven to impact our life expectancy and our health expectancy. And we're going to talk a little more about that in a few minutes, but those are some of the challenges that both women and men face as they live longer lives. So one of the questions that comes up when we think about long life has to do with, well, how do we even define what is old? When we started Age Wave back in 1986, and by the way, as a sidebar, at that time I was in my 30s. So if you do the math, you can figure out I am now 71 years old. So what started out as investigating the field of aging and the trends that come out of it has turned into a personal thing for me too. I not only am interested in this professionally, but personally, it affects me directly. By the way, just for those of you who are not familiar with Age Wave, I want to let you know that Age Wave has been in this area of expertise, aging, longevity, retirement, doing studies, doing research, being on the cutting edge since 1986. And we've recently done a series of studies during COVID. And today I'm going to share with you some of the findings from our most recent studies. So back to this question, how old is old? What are you thinking in your mind as you're sitting there listening to me, watching me, hopefully? What age do you think of as old? Well, for many people, that number is 65. And that is an incredibly powerful number because you could get off a plane in Paris or Melbourne, Australia, and just by dialing that number up or dialing that number down, you could completely transform the economy of a country. So it's a powerful number. So where did it come from? Well, it came from this guy, Otto von Bismarck. He created the very first pension plan in Europe in the 1880s, and he chose the number 65 as the marker of old age. Now, keep in mind, at that time, average life expectancy was only 45 in Europe. So Otto von Bismarck was a very interesting actuary. He chose a number that he thought very few people would ever get to. And if we were to use Bismarck's formula today, we would mark our old age and many of the benefits that come along with it as being somewhere in the 90s. Now, I'm not suggesting we do that, but it's an interesting thing to keep in mind. So what else? What does aging look like today? Let me show you a couple of examples. Here's Shelley Keeling. She's 69 years old. She's a practicing attorney and a professional runner. And I think we can all agree she looks pretty great. But if you think she's pretty great, let's take a look at her mom, Ida Keeling, 105 years old in this photo. And what's particularly interesting is Ida didn't even start running until she was 67 years old. So the possibilities are endless. What this tells us is that people can really reinvent themselves at any age. Let's look at John Glenn. He did not reinvent himself. He was a former US Senator, a former astronaut, but at 77, he traveled into space. And what I find particularly interesting is that when he came back, rather than the media embracing him, they gave him a little bit of a hard time. They said to him, hey, this is just a publicity stunt. I mean, come on, really? And John Glenn's answer was one that has really made him my hero. He said, hey, just because I'm 77 doesn't mean that I don't have dreams. That message has always stuck with me. The idea that who can you be as you get older is a very real one. Richard Branson embraced that question. He took John Glenn's model, and at 71, he just this past year flew to the edge of space. And I'm sure Richard Branson plans on doing it again and again, and maybe even going further. So what we each have to ask ourselves and what we have to ask our culture is, well, how do we live a more empowered and ageless kind of aging? And let me add, it's not a one-size-fits-all answer. There's going to be different kinds of aging, different kinds of quests that each and every one of us go after as we continue to live long and hopefully live well. And we're going to talk about some of the issues that we face as we live long and live well in a few minutes. But let's move on to this second converging trend, and that has to do with demographics. Now, I happen to love demographics, and you might look at me and say, that's crazy. How could you love demographics? Well, what I love about demographics is they give us a window into our future, because we're living in very unpredictable times, with COVID in particular, incredibly unpredictable times. But demographics are totally predictable. And we're going to take a look at aging demographics. But let me give you a little bit of the headline first. And the headline is this baby boom generation. They are transforming aging demographics. People born between 1946, 1964, 73 million people have become part of the age wave. So let's look at the changing population segments over time. If we look from 2010 into the future, 2030, what we can see is that the real growth in population is taking place in the oldest segments of the population. Now, that's different than what we've ever seen before. We always thought that youth is where the growth is, youth is where the action is. Well, maybe not so much anymore. This is a real transformation. And what makes it particularly interesting is the boomer generation has always, at every step along their lifespan, been change agents. So that we know that the boomers, today's older adults, and tomorrow's, they're not going to look a lot like yesterday's older adults. Now, let me be clear about this. The boomers love their parents and their grandparents and respect them and have gone out of their way in most instances to take care of them and help them through their aging process, but they don't intend to age like them. Let's remember they've transformed the whole idea of marriage more than once. They've also transformed the world of work. And they also, the whole idea of the way we access books and information has completely been transformed by the boomer generation. So recognize the fact that they are going to be reinventing aging and longevity. And as a result, many of the aging services, including senior centers, are going to need to think about reinventing themselves as well, so that they can be more purposeful in this whole new kind of aging that we're beginning to see. So let's keep going. Let's build on the story. So if we have this longevity bonus and this new generation of aging adults, we have to ask ourselves, if we have these 30 extra years, where are we going to put them? How are we going to use them? These are essential questions that we need to ask ourselves. Throughout most of history, we've lived our lives in a very linear way, and it was very defined by aging and by gender. And I have some pictures that I'm going to share with you in a minute. But first we learned, then we worked, then we got some time to rest and retire. So the pictures, we got a chance to learn mostly when we were young. In fact, almost exclusively in the past when we were young. Then we grew up, we fell in love, we got married, and we primarily did that just once. And when we were young, built a family again when we were young, very strong division of labor. A husband went off to work, a wife took care of house and home and kids, very strong division of labor. Husband retired, got a gold watch. Husband and wife went on a cruise, and then they probably died. And that was the linear life plan. Again, very age defined, very gender defined. But now we have that longevity bonus, that extra 30 years of life. And the question that I'll ask each and every one of you is, well, where do you want to put that longevity bonus? Do you want to just sort of tag it on to the end of life so that you get to feel, and I mean feel, older and older, and the things that we generally associate with traditional aging, frailty and vulnerability? When I ask people this, very few people say yes to that. Instead, what they say is they want to take that longevity bonus and distribute it throughout their lives. So what does that look like? It looks like people going back to school when they're 40 or 60 or 85. It looks like people having second, third, maybe even fourth and fifth careers. If your first relationship doesn't work out as great as you expected it to, you have a chance to have a second chance at that, and frankly, a second chance at life. It's about this idea of reinvention. So let me dive into that for a minute. Just to give you an example of what it could look like. I have a friend, he was a dentist in his early 60s. He came up to me one day and he said, you know, Maddy, I'm considering something and I wanted to talk it over with you. I said, great, what's up? And he said, well, as you know, I'm a dentist. I've had a great lifestyle, great run as a dentist, but I'm thinking of giving it all up. And I'm like, well, why? I mean, are you thinking of retiring? Because he was 60. And he said, no, I feel too young to retire. Instead, I want to do something different. I go, well, really? Like, what's making you think about doing that? And his answer is one that has always stuck with me. He said, you know, I decided to become a dentist when I was 18 years old. I'm not going to live with an 18-year-old's decision the rest of my life. I want to go back to school. I want to do something different. And you know what? He did. He went back to school, became a psychologist, and now he's a practicing psychologist. So the idea of reinvention or re-engaging in a new way, reigniting your life, these are very real possibilities in this longer life that we all are getting the opportunity to experience. So let's keep going here. Let's take a look at this whole idea of matching health span to lifespan, because we're hopefully at the tail ends, but have been living in this COVID reality for a year and a half, and it has really made each and every one of us think about health span and lifespan a little bit differently. But let's dive into this subject matter. So in one of our studies, in one of our more recent studies, we asked retirees, tell us, what's the key to a happy retirement? And hands down, it was good health. So we know that health span, which is how many healthy years of life that you live in, is certainly as important as lifespan. And it's something that we want to keep expanding if possible. At the same time, we know that as one gets older, we're more likely to get chronic degenerative diseases, diseases that in some instances are preventable. In other instances, maybe just delayable, things like heart disease and high blood pressure and stroke, diabetes. That's what we're really talking about here. We know that health span is a very important issue for each and every one of us because we're all aging, and that on average, 10 years of our lives, at the end of our lives, are spent in poor health. And the question becomes, what can we do to change that? Or are there things we can change? And I think these questions have become even more urgent during the COVID pandemic. 93% of retirees told us in one of our most recent studies done in the middle of COVID that it is never too late to improve your health. So most of them told us they knew the right things to do, but they didn't necessarily do it. There is this, what we at AgeWave call an intention action gap, with only 55% of retirees saying they even maintain a healthy diet, even though they know what a healthy diet looks like, and only 52% exercise regularly. So these are just two examples of some of the things we can do to expand our health span to better match our lifespan. And this is a place where social services and senior centers can really play an important role. Okay, so how do we improve wellness in this new normal, in this COVID era where people are still scared about getting together physically. And yet we know that, for instance, social interaction is one of the things that help keep us healthy and well. Well, I'm going to talk about 5 different things that we can do. And by the way, this is a place where senior centers and the whole aging community can really play an important role. So let's begin by taking a look at ageism, fighting ageism and ageist stereotypes. Now, we all know that ageism may in fact be the very last ism that's almost acceptable. It's kind of in the very air we breathe. Even older people oftentimes feel ageist inside them. They may feel, for instance, that, oh, I'm too old to try something new or to learn something new or to get involved in sports. Well, that's not the case necessarily. This is an example, by the way, of advertisements that were done by the city of Boston. They were trying to take away the myths of ageism. They showed people who were cranky, who were definitely not cranky, very much not inactive, very much not frail or over the hill, and dismiss these ageist thoughts that are around us, these stereotypes that we end up living with right here and right now. And by the way, you might say, okay, well, so people are ageist. What's the big deal? Well, it actually impacts the health of individuals. There was a Yale study that was done. They showed that there's a direct connection between holding ageist attitudes of older people and your life expectancy. They also saw that it affected mental health, in particular depression. So let me show you an example that I think of as a great example of someone who's really trying to change this whole ageist attitude. And this is Lynn Slater. Now, Lynn Slater is 64, and you can see she's on Instagram, but she's also a professor at Fordham University. And what she says to her Instagram followers, which is more than 500,000, is, I'm not 20, I don't want to be 20, but I'm really super cool. That's what I think about when I'm posting a photo. So this is like reversing this whole idea that aging isn't something you want to embrace. It's taking a whole new attitude about it. Let me show you another example of someone taking on aging in a brand new way without even thinking about it.
Madonna Butter, an 86-year-old nun. Oh, sorry, sister. Sister Madonna Butter, 86 years old, goes for a morning run. Good for you, sister. She's still active at her age. That's great. Whoa, maybe a little too active. Nap time, sister?
I don't think so.
The sister doesn't think so. Okay. Wait, what? Iron Man? Oh, no. This is a bad idea, sister. A real bad idea.
Relax, she's the Iron Nun.
But she won't make it. This is an Iron Man.
The first 45 didn't kill me.
You've done 45 of these? Okay. Do your thing, sister. Do your thing.
So what I love about this ad is it's not just showcasing somebody in their 80s doing something remarkable. It's that Nike is embracing it and helping to change this image of aging. What else do we know? Well, I think we all know that emphasizing fitness and wellness is a very important part of successful aging. In fact, there was a study done that showed that if you were to do just one thing, and by the way, it was the MacArthur studies on successful aging, and that would be just walking 30 minutes a day, that would be the best and easiest way to bring your youth with you into that second and third part of life. So, and by the way, you guys already know this and are doing things to make that happen. For instance, I love these longevity stick classes that are taking place at Westminster and Fountain Valley. It's a unique exercise program that's fun and embraces the whole Vietnamese culture. So that's incredible. And it's also something that other senior centers may look at and say, yes, we ought to be doing this program or something similar to this program. So we know that fitness and exercise is one side of the equation. So the other side, or one of many other sides of this wellness issue of increasing health span to better match lifespan, has to do with what we eat, the food we put in our bodies. Now, let's face it, our bodies are machines. I love what Michael Pollan says. He says, eat real food, not too much, mostly plants. Now, that's pretty simple. I would also say that recently we've seen everybody begin to talk about and think about the idea that it's not just what you eat, but when you eat that really matters. And that has to do with maybe after you eat dinner, not eating anything until the next morning. So that's just one small example of what you could do. I personally eat an anti-inflammatory diet. Now, I started eating that because I was having horrible pain in my hips. And ultimately, I had to get a hip replacement in both my hips at the same time. And I asked my doctor, well, what can I do to prepare for this and to have a good recovery? And he said, nothing, go buy a cane. And that wasn't part of my plan. I didn't want to do that. So I did some research and I discovered that there's this kind of diet, anti-inflammatory. It's pretty simple. It's really just no dairy, no gluten, and no or little sugar. And I embraced that diet. And within 6 weeks, all the pain that I had felt in my hips, and it was terrible pain, had gone away. I still did get the hip replacement because I was bone on bone, but it really made a huge difference. And I would say that what we put in our mouths really feeds all of our cells, and something that we should really think about continuously. And, realize, you don't have to be perfect, but doing the best you can is going to make you feel better and healthier. What else are we seeing? Well, we're seeing this whole idea of brain health really come front and center, and innovating with brain health programs at senior centers is really something that you're already doing. Like, for instance, I know at Mission Viejo, you have a learning program on the Constitution. That's a great way of learning. Great thing to learn. Learning new languages is a big deal. And during COVID, this whole idea of brain health has even become more of an issue. In our study that we recently did, we found that even during COVID, the most feared condition of later life is Alzheimer's and dementia. And by the way, as we get older, we're far more likely to have to deal with cognitive decline and Alzheimer's disease. And we have every reason to fear these, but there are some things that we can do, many of which we've already talked about, like diet and exercise are certainly there. But we also know that women are twice as likely to get Alzheimer's disease as men. There's also other kinds of programs that we can do that you're already doing, and that could be embraced by other senior centers. This virtual drumming program that's being done in Newport Beach, it's pitched as solo sheltering in silence, which I thought the idea of virtual drumming classes was fantastic. By the way, any kind of learning a musical instrument is good for your brain. It also creates endorphins in your system, similar to those that are created through running. So these kinds of programs are amazing. What else are we seeing? Well, we're seeing this is a huge issue, this whole idea of social connectivity. And during COVID, a lot of us were afraid to leave our houses, afraid to interact with people. And now that the vaccine is available, that's beginning to change a little bit. So the idea of reconnecting in your senior centers is becoming more likely, and certainly something that we should all really encourage. One of the things we know for sure, based on studies that have been done, is that low social interaction is as bad for your health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So this is a real issue, and it's an issue that senior centers and the social services community can really help make a difference about. It's as dangerous as being an alcoholic and as harmful as never exercising. So this is something that we need to all pay attention to, twice as dangerous as obesity. Now, with solo aging really on the increase, especially for women who live longer than men, it's something we really need to pay attention to. In one of our studies, we asked people, what's the biggest loss in retirement? We asked pre-retirees what they expected to be, and we asked retirees what it was for them. So first, let's look at pre-retirees. When we asked pre-retirees what they thought the biggest loss was, they said it was reliable income. And that makes a lot of sense when you think about it. I mean, a couple extra years of working and earning an income can make the world of difference. Makes a lot of sense. But then we asked retirees what they thought the biggest loss was. They said that the biggest loss in retirement were social connections, followed by reliable income. But this idea of interacting with each other becomes more and more important. And as we get older, the sources for doing so become less and less. So we've got to encourage it. Of course, senior centers is one of the obvious places that we can make that happen. So that's not just a great example of the importance of social interaction and family in particular. It's also a great example of purpose, because purpose is the next thing we're going to be talking about. And purpose, by the way, the number one reason people find purpose is through their family. That's from one of our most recent studies. Let's take a look at purpose. 92% of retirees say purpose is a key to successful retirement. And by the way, it doesn't have to be a big thing. It could mean maybe just walking your dog or being responsible for another kind of pet. 93% of retirees say it is important to feel useful in retirement. And they say that actually being useful helps them to feel youthful. So those two concepts are very tightly connected. Yet 31%, almost a third of new retirees say they have a struggle finding a sense of purpose. Let me show you an example of a group of older adults in a retirement community who found purpose with a group of kids from Brazil.
Hello, hello.
Melissa.
Hi, Dick. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
It's the first time that I'm talking with someone from another country.
I'm very excited to be doing this.
I look like I'm only 25, but I'm 88.
I'm living with my old brother. He has 23 years.
Do you know, instead of saying he has 23 years, you could say he is 23 years old.
I tried to go to Lollapalooza that we have next week, I think, in Brazil, but my mom didn't let me.
You got a good mom.
Good morning, dear Julia. Good morning to you.
This is your dad?
That's me and my wife when we were young.
Oh, you were good looking when you were young. And you're still good looking.
If you could just dream and have whatever you want, what do you think you would like to be doing?
I see myself in a big family, you know, with a beautiful wife. You know. I want to thank you for this change of experience, you know. You are incredible.
Obrigado.
You are my new granddaughter, and I love you.
I love you too.
And if you were here, I would give you a big hug.
Oh yeah, let's hug. Oh. Bye.
Bye.
So by the way, these are the kinds of programs that you could probably do in your senior centers. I know Laguna Niguel is doing a program right now with high school students interacting with people who are taking part in senior centers and teaching each other different skills. The high school students, for instance, teaching the older adults technology and teaching them the slang that they use and what it means. For instance, what does IRL mean? Teaching them how to use those kinds of words. So purpose is a very important, essential issue that affects both our health span and our lifespan. We talked today about 4 powerful trends that are converging, impacting the whole concept of ageless aging. For one thing, we're experiencing a longevity bonus, even in the middle of COVID. Although we've seen life expectancy go down ever so slightly, longevity experts tell us it's going to continue to rise. At the same time, we're seeing this new generation, this generation of boomers beginning to move into their longevity, into their aging years. In addition to which, this whole idea of matching health span, the number of healthy years to our lifespan, is becoming increasingly important and something that social services in the world of aging, as well as senior centers, have to really pay even more attention to than they have been paying. And the question remains, how do we do that? How do we improve wellness in the new normal? We talked about a few ways. You're doing a bunch of things already. Let's find some new and exciting ways to bring our health span to better match our lifespan. Thank you all for your time, for your energy, and for moving us forward into this whole world of ageless aging.
Thank you, Maddy, for that amazing presentation. I got chills. That commercial with the grandpa. Oh, I've seen it before, but never so long. It was amazing. So thank you for that. Now we're gonna, obviously we've got Maddy here. We're gonna go live to her. We have a couple questions that we want to answer. And again, as a quick reminder, if you have something specific you would like to ask Maddy, add that into the chat box, or excuse me, the Q&A box, which is in the bottom right part of your screen. We do have time for a couple questions. So first off, what are your thoughts on ageism in today's society?
Good question to ask, Steve. I talked about it a little bit in my presentation because it's such an important issue. And one of the things I said is it's kind of pervasive. It's in the very air we breathe, and it impacts young people and older people. I mean, we all, no matter how old we are, we believe some of these ageist thoughts. And what's really odd to me is in our society that it's okay to feel ageist. I mean, racism and genderism, sexism, those are not okay anymore. I think we need to take the same attitude towards ageism. And according to the World Health Organization, they identify ageism as one of the urgent issues of our era. I mean, that's how important it is. So one question that becomes, oh, by the way, before I even talk about how to fight ageism, which I'd like to do for a minute, there's some things that we ought to know, and that is that ageism actually can impact life expectancy. It can shorten lifespans for us. So that's something to keep in mind, and health spans as well. So how do we fight it? Well, first we raise our awareness that we're thinking ageist thoughts probably all the time. Maybe if you're in your 70s like me, you think I'm too old to try something new or to take on a new sport. That's just not the case. So we've got to rid ourselves of these kinds of thoughts. And second, we need to recognize that there are gifts that come with aging, and we've got to embrace them, like wisdom and experience. And from one of the age wave studies that we just recently have completed, that whole muscle of resiliency, of being able to bounce back from something bad happening, like COVID, for instance, we're pretty good at that. So we ought to embrace those gifts of aging.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
What advice do you have to retire and age successfully?
Retire and age successfully are not the same things exactly. First of all, age successfully, that's a very big question. And there's all kinds of things that we can do. And it's kind of a holistic exercise. I mean, we talk about exercise. And by the way, according to the MacArthur studies on successful aging, the number one thing we can do to sort of bring our youth with us into our second and third parts of our lives is to just walk 30 minutes every day. So I think we could all do just that. But successful aging is not necessarily something that's connected directly with retirement, because we see so many people retiring, maybe taking early retirement, but also people retiring later. For instance, I'll use myself again as an example. I'm 71 and I'm still very much involved in work, and I plan on being for a while. But the key thing about retirement is planning for both the financial and the non-financial aspects of retirement. And we've learned this through our studies. I mean, yes, you've got to make sure you've got the money so that you don't end up broke at the end of your life. In addition to which, though, there's non-financial things, and I've already talked about a lot of them. One is, your health, your well-being, your social connectivity, and most importantly, in some ways, is finding a sense of purpose.
Well, I couldn't agree more, and I hope you don't consider retiring anytime soon. Your knowledge is vast and can do a wealth of good, especially in these days and these times in the pandemic as we come out of that. Transitioning from your home to a senior community or assisted living can be a challenge. What recommendations do you have to help facilitate and transition into those pieces?
Yeah, well, first, just from our studies, what we have learned is that most older adults would prefer to what they call age in place, rather than move to a new place, move to a senior community. And although there's probably some value in that at different points in your life. So aging in place is the number one thing that people want to do. However, lots of people have more than one move in their life after retirement. They may move to live closer to their grandchildren, or to live close to the beach, or maybe to pursue a hobby, or maybe just to live life better and less expensively. Like moving from California to anywhere else is probably a good move, although I'm not trying to encourage people to leave California. Yeah, you could save a lot of money. So there's that move. And then when people get a little bit older, sometimes in their 80s, sometimes later, if they're starting to feel a little more vulnerable, and maybe that they need some potential services that can be offered in senior communities, that's when they start looking for these kinds of senior communities. So I don't think it's a one move thing. I think it's a process, and it's a process based not necessarily by chronologic age, but by lifestyle and the kinds of things that are going on in your life in terms of your health.
I agree again as well. One of we're getting so many comments, not a lot of questions as much as comments about thanking you for the presentation, an incredible presentation. One suggestion somebody had, Linda said, was have a purpose is a really wonderful thing to have. And others have said fighting ageism is a huge challenge, and it can be accomplished by exactly what Maddy said. Keep trying and don't give up. That's a great, I think, another wonderful suggestion for that. What resources do you recommend for seniors? Where can they turn to as they transition into a senior?
Well, I don't even know what that means, senior, to be honest with you. As we move through life's different stages and hit retirement, and maybe are looking for ways to, or maybe we need help. I mean, maybe we need some kind of help in our community. I mean, the senior centers and the senior resources, like caring for people, caregiving. I'm living a little bit too much here, but what I'm trying to say really is that I don't think age should define who we are and what our needs are. But if you are looking for resources, I think the senior centers are a great place to start. I mean, they can be like command central that can maybe send you to the different places that you need to be. In addition to which, there are some resources out there like books. For instance, my co-founder of AgeWave and husband, Ken Dychtwald, recently wrote a book called What Retirees Want, that is a fantastic resource that can help older adults as they're moving through and to and through retirement to figure out what their needs are, what their wants are, and how they want to live their life. And you could really learn a lot just from picking up that book. So little plug there.
Yeah, no, I get that. One of the things, you just shared about the senior centers, that all the large cities in Orange County, and we're talking specifically Orange County, have a senior center. For my city where I live in, La Palma doesn't have a senior center. Most of our seniors go to Buena Park, which has a very robust and large program for seniors to attend, which I think is fantastic. A couple of the notes we had before, one was in terms of for the gift bags. One of the things that they had mentioned was the Oasis Senior Center in Newport Beach has the swag bags. The Norman B. Murray Center in Mission Viejo has bags. Dorothy, I think it's Visser or Vicer in San Clemente, I think that's his, has bags. The Garden Grove, the Lewis Lake Senior Center in Garden Grove has bags. Buena Park, Stanton, Yorba Linda, and Tustin all have of those goodie bags, swag bags, if you will, not goodie bags, I should say swag bags. Have those for you. So when we rebroadcast this presentation, Maddy's and all the rest of them, we've been able to, you'll be able to utilize those pieces into it. So Maddy, thank you very, very much for all your wealth of information. Your presentation was amazing. And we appreciate you being here.
Thank you. And I hope the rest of the meeting goes great. Seems like you're off to a pretty good meeting here.